At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Welcome to Studio Sacramento. Today's episode was developed in partnership with the local chapter of the American Leadership Forum. Retired Sacramento Police Chief Rick Braziel served in many roles since he joined the police force in 1979. Braziel worked in a variety of assignments, including K-9 handler, patrol sergeant, watch commander, captain of the Metro SWAT, K-9, bomb squad, air operations, and narcotics and vice squad. He has served as police chief since 2007. Now retired, Chief Braziel joins us on Studio Sacramento and reflects on crime, community, and his perspective on the city he served for 33 years in his exit interview. Welcome, Chief Braziel.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
So tell me, you're retired now. Can you, when you're an active police chief, ever really put down the job?
No, when you're active, you can't. It really is 24/7. And folks asked me when I was getting ready to leave, when's the last time you went on a vacation? So first you have to define vacation.
Right.
And secondly, you're never really there because you're always answering the phone, checking emails. And so for the last month, I've been kind of weaning myself off of that, slowly getting out of the emails, getting off of the text messaging streams and that. So it's taken about a month to kind of wean myself off. It's actually, the first week or so were very difficult, right around the holidays at the end of the year, and now it's becoming much easier in the process. So it's good. And retired is kind of not the appropriate term. I'm leaving one career and then going out and doing other things. So that's the beauty of it. I'm not sitting home waiting for the sun to come up or waiting for the sun to go down. They're still involved in the community, still involved in making Sacramento a better place.
Right. Other things, what other things are you getting involved in? There's
a couple things. One, the Police Foundation in Washington, D.C. asked if I'd be one of their executive fellows. I'm one of 5 executive fellows.
Wow.
And we do a lot of research stuff that's there. And then we had started in California, started as the California Chiefs Project. It was Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Redlands. And it was a study that we requested a few years ago to look at the impact on arrest of parolees and probationers. And that study came out just last week.
And what did it say?
It basically said that there's several different findings. One of the most important findings for us is that each person when they're released from prison or put on probation is given an assessment, or supposed to be given an assessment. And certain validated assessment tools are very accurate in predicting who's most likely to reoffend and commit crime again. And when assessment tools aren't being used, then the application or information behind who's most likely to reoffend is not accurate.
So who is most likely to reoffend?
It depends on the individual.
Okay, but just give us something to go on.
So what happens is, and I'll kind of give you an example, Rick Braziel gets arrested and I'm released from prison, and prior to being released, there's an assessment tool that's given to me, and they look at where I'm from, my background, employability, who my friends are, am I associated with gang members, and they come up with an assessment of am I likely to reoffend in a high end all the way down to a low end. And so what the study came out and showed is that assessment tool is extremely accurate in predicting who's most likely to be rearrested. So what that means for us in law enforcement is if we can use that tool and with limited resources target those most likely to reoffend with prevention techniques or intervention tools, and get them get to them before they decide to jump back into crime.
Share with us the 2 or 3 big factors that if you see on this assessment tool that 1, 2, or 3 of these things are either present or not present, it's a big warning sign that someone's going to reoffend.
Yeah, there's a multitude, but you look at substance abuse and employability. Who can get a job and who can stay straight?
Let me bring up something to you on employability, and so I want to throw this at you.
Absolutely.
Okay, I know an individual who ended up being involved in criminal activity, went to prison, got out, wanted to go straight, and is still struggling to do so. And he said to me, Scott, you would not hire me. Other people won't hire me. I paid my debt to society, but the only way that I can get into a place of employment is to go through a temp service and hope that I can get to know somebody well enough to where they'll overlook my criminal offense. And so there's a whole bunch of folks that try, but they end up back in the system because there is no good conduit. How do you respond to that based on the findings of the study?
First, it's true. It's absolutely true.
It is true.
It's absolutely true. And what's more important is the economy, and that's the perfect storm we've been talking about for a long time, is when you've got the downturn in the economy and you've got folks who are in jobs that are way overqualified for those positions. So you've got someone who's either coming out of high school, coming out of college, or coming out of prison who's looking for a job, and you've got someone in a job who's overqualified to that job to begin with because of the economy. It's hard for anyone to break into it. The key for us is, us meaning society in general, is how do we target someone who has paid their debt back to society? How do we target them and get them into programs that make them more employable? And then it's up to them. They do have to do just like anyone else, just like getting out of college. You've got to get that internship. You've got to find that connection. You've got to get to know somebody to get the job.
Are you a contrarian, or is policing evolving in its philosophy? And the reason that I ask you that question is that years ago, it was lock them up until they're too old to reoffend. You're talking about creating programs, and 20 years ago, people would say that's soft-headed claptrap.
Yeah, no, it's the reality of it. You can't arrest your way out of any problem. There's two things we have to do. We have to one, most importantly, prevent people from going down the wrong path anyway. I'm heavily involved with Fight Crime, Invest in Kids. We need to invest in the early childhood education to get people through school, get them to graduate, and get them into trade training programs or into college, number one. Number two is you can't just keep arresting folks and throwing them back in prison. It doesn't work. So those that need to go back to prison need to go back to prison. There's some horrible people out there who need to spend the rest of their lives in prison. But it's a small percentage of the population of those that go to jail. The rest of the folks, we need to identify, how do we get them straight? How do you get them straight? You know, Rand Corporation did a crime calculator on what are the economic impacts of crime. It's just not how much does it cost to cop and how much does it cost to incarcerate. It's how much does it cost the insurance companies? How much does it cost someone in lost wages because they don't have a car because it was stolen? There's huge economic impacts on people committing crimes. So if we can reduce the number of crimes by being smarter, you've improved the economy, you put more money back in the economic system, so it becomes a win-win for everybody.
Chief, I got to tell you, I'm fascinated by this discussion because you sound more like an academic or someone who's involved in sort of sociology than Daryl Gates with, you know, let's go ahead, lock them up, keep them in there until they're old, and reprogramming or training really means nothing. What if you're part of a broader vanguard in terms of thought on policing, what caused the evolution? Because 20 years ago, it was a much different conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. One, and there are still people out there that still think lock them up, throw them in jail. You know, we're working now to make Sacramento a model for the Sacramento region, not just the city, for progressive law enforcement. You know, and I'm on the phone earlier trying to get other chiefs in the region to realize that it's not about just getting money to your jurisdiction. It's about how do you take the money and regionally look at crime, because crime is a regional problem, not unique to Folsom or Sacramento. I'll give you a quick example. So there's $1 million coming to the cities to deal with those folks who've been released to the county custody. Sacramento, the city of Sacramento has 84% of those being released. Folsom has 0.7%. But yet, if you use the old school policing, then Folsom would get an equal percent of the share of the pie, and that's not appropriate. The money needs to be put to regional perspectives, look at a regional approach, instead of, you know, Folsom getting 17% of the money and Sacramento getting 17% of the money. The taxpayers don't want that. What they want is a reduction in crime. And so how progressively do you do that? And a lot of that has to come about, for me personally, is how do you take private business practices and implement them in law enforcement? Because we're a business. Law enforcement is a business, and for too long we've been in our own silos, and we need to start approaching it from a business perspective. So,
but the business, as the business has been on servicing the incarcerated end, not necessarily the prevention end.
Yeah, and we've lost sight of who are our customers. You know, when you look at policing, who's the customer? Well, the customer is the community, the customer is business, and in reality, the customer is those that you arrest. And you don't want that.
That's an
that
interesting
customer.
thought.
It is, absolutely. You provide a service to them. So how do you keep them from being rearrested is the goal. It's the same thing with why do we write traffic citations? The goal of writing a traffic citation is to reduce the number of crashes, not to sit and write tickets to write tickets. And by the way, just a little misnomer, we don't get any, the city of Sacramento gets no revenue off a traffic citation.
You realize that all of us think that it's all about the end of the month making your quota and bringing in some cash to the department.
And
right?
there's no, that's why I'd throw out that no cash comes back to the Sacramento Police Department from the tickets we write.
Okay, since you
So
said
I'm
willing to accept it. I'm not sure how many people are willing to accept it, but we'll go with you on this one. I want to turn the discussion to talk about some more national issues that impact this area. Newtown. What did the Newtown tragedy mean to you?
You know, that's really big in everybody's minds. And I was on the phone earlier in the week talking with someone from NBC News, and when you look at Newtown, people are focused on what I'll call the hardware end of it, gun control. And I keep trying to refocus folks. It's not about gun control, it's about reducing gun violence. And there's a difference when you do that focus.
Explain the distinction.
Well, a real quick analogy, if we stop selling guns in the United States today, no more guns ever sold, all guns come off shelves. We have millions and millions and millions of guns out there. Gun violence would stay the same. Well, you wouldn't see a reduction in gun violence because we didn't add new guns. We still have guns out there. So how do you deal with the hardware part of it? And the hardware, I'll use hardware software because people understand IT. So hardware is the guns, the ammunition, the size of the magazines. Then you have the software side. It's the people side. So in one of the things that we missed the boat on, and we talked about it just a minute ago with criminals, is what are we doing on the prevention intervention side from keeping people who shouldn't have guns from having guns? In this case, this is an example of someone who was misguided in efforts to teach a son something that thought it might be good to teach him how to shoot. No one who has someone who is despondent or has mental health issues should have access to a weapon. And we've seen a different example with the military.
But don't laws, privacy protection laws, healthcare privacy laws, keep that sort of information from ever getting out to anyone?
It's interesting because people use the HIPAA laws. Well, HIPAA doesn't protect all that information. And so there are avenues of getting that information to law enforcement information to the mental health community. The problem we have is it goes back to traditional silos. That you've got the mental health community in their silo, and you've got the law enforcement community in their silo. And the consumers, those that are consumers of the mental health services, don't want law enforcement to know about them because they assume that the goal is to arrest and incarcerate. Well, the goal is not to arrest and incarcerate. The goal is to help them to be successful. And in this case, keeping guns out of the hands of those who have mental health issues, or even families who have someone who has a mental health issue, is really important.
So is the NRA onto something when they make the statement about leaning into fixing mental health access and mental health coverage? Because there are those who say that that is a dodge on their part from dealing with the issue. But it sounds like that there's some agreement there with you.
That's a legitimate issue, and it needs to be addressed. The other issue is how do you keep, and the NRA will agree with this, and everyone else will too, how do you keep guns out of criminals' hands as well? So you've got, that's the other soft side of it. You know, in Sacramento, we're fortunate we have what's called an ammunition ordinance. So if you go to buy handgun ammunition in the city, you have to present a government ID and a thumbprint. We then run that purchase database against the DOJ database to match up with those who are, if you're prohibited from owning a firearm, meaning you're an ex-convict, an ex-con, you shouldn't be buying ammunition.
But all that's fine. All that's fine for folks that obey the law. But I had in Stockton's police chief, who I assume that you know, and a former gang member who runs a program that that agency coordinates with. He said, I can buy a gun in 5 minutes on the streets of Stockton for $50.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So while that takes care of the law-abiding citizen, how does that solution do anything for the illegal trade that happens on the street every day around us?
Two things. One, again, let's focus on the soft side, the people side. We have folks who consider themselves responsible gun owners. Right? They go out and they buy a handgun and they put it up in their closet to keep it out of children's way, and they don't even put the ammo with the gun. That doesn't stop the burglar from stealing the guns. If you look at most of the guns that are seized in the city of Sacramento, they were stolen in a burglary. And so these were guns that were purchased legally by a responsible gun owner who didn't have enough knowledge on how to adequately secure the weapon. So in conversations at the state capitol recently, this is all about how do you educate responsible gun owners to be more responsible. And it's not just about, it's the accidental shooting, because it's not just about the crime. It's how many young children do we see who are shot by a friend playing with a gun that they shouldn't have had access to, or they shot themselves playing with a gun that they shouldn't have had access to.
If you were gun safety czar, what 3 things could we do, could be changed, if you could unilaterally implement them, that would actually move the needle and improve society on this subject?
2 things. One is do a better job of matching up the DOJ prohibited database with those that have purchased or prior purchases. Get the guns out of bad guys' hands. Secondly, offer incentives for folks to buy gun safes and teach people how to do it. And lastly, do a regular routine education campaign to gun owners. When you register a gun, you should be getting a mailer once a year or every other year telling you, here's what you need to do, here's a discount for a gun safe, here's what happens if you have a family member that has mental health issues. Just constantly educate the legitimate gun owning public on how to be more responsible.
I've never heard the thing about gun safes before. Go a bit further on that.
Sure. Every person that purchases a weapon should have a gun safe to lock their gun up. So that it's in a safe, it's secured, so burglars can't steal it, and the neighborhood kids can't come play with it if you have a child. So let's offer low-cost incentives to buy gun safes for people to put in their homes to basically secure their weapons away from the thieves and away from those that small children or those with mental health issues who don't belong having them. And make them a combination safe. It's too easy to find a key. It's too easy to cut a bolt. So these need to be combination safes that folks have to remember the combination the gun owner does. And you want to move the needle, you've got the enforcement piece, but you also have the prevention piece.
What got you into law enforcement in the first place anyway?
Oh, that's an interesting story. I never thought about being a police officer. My goal was in high school I wanted to be a military pilot.
Really?
So my goal was to go to one of the military academies, preferably the Air Force Academy. So I did all the things that you're supposed to do behind that. Heavy science and math, student body president, speech and debate, sports.
What high school?
Elk Grove. Thundering Herd.
Ah!
Go Thundering Herd.
Class of?
78.
All right.
Go Herd. And then I found out in my senior year I didn't have 20/20 vision. And so in order to be a pilot in the military, you have to have perfect uncorrected vision before you go to flight school, meaning after you graduate. So I have a heavy science and math background. And was going to Sac State to become an engineer, had a job as an associate engineer doing blueprints, and didn't like it. And realized this was not for me because it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to fly airplanes. And I went on a ride along with my dad. He's a retired police officer now, but just went on a ride along on Graveyard and saw my dad interacting with folks in a completely different light. He took a report from a woman who'd been a victim and she was at the hospital. And I saw my dad interact with her in a way I'd never seen my dad ever.
Really?
Yeah, he's your dad.
Right.
He's your Babe Ruth coach. He's the one that says you got to get 3.5 GPA. He's the one that makes sure that you buy by the rules. Loving, supporting, but also one of those, there's rules. And I saw him in a completely different light, a compassion that's like, I think this job might be for me. And when I got hired by the police department, he gave me 2 pieces of advice. So the first piece of advice is treat everybody with respect. Even the bad guys, treat them with respect. And I think that goes back to my progressive attitude that you talked about earlier. And he said, and the second piece of advice is don't ever embarrass me.
Well said for a father.
Yeah, and so I think I've met both his expectations after 33 years in the police department. I think I've met both those.
Now, this is fascinating. You're an engineer by training. So how does that sort of discipline, because engineers have their own way of looking at the world, how does that sort of philosophy, methodology inform how you approached police work?
People would say I'm a planner. And our budget folks, early on when I took over as chief, didn't like it because I know spreadsheets and I'm good with numbers, which is not historically what chiefs are good at. So when it came to cutting a budget, it was the perfect time for me because I could look at a budget document and say the numbers aren't right. And then so you didn't get your calculator out. I'm looking at the document, the numbers aren't right, we need to rework the numbers. And they'd go back and rework them and turn out they were wrong. So everything I've done has been from a planning perspective. So when I took over as chief 5 years ago, the city manager at the time, Ray Carriage, asked, what's your number one goal? I said, to develop a cadre of folks that will replace me, not only replace me, but replace the person that replaces me. That's my job, succession planning. I need to plan for what I told them 5 years down the road. I expected my departure to be about that. So it really helped guide me through the organization as everything was planned out. I call it playing chess, not checkers. In law enforcement, too many chiefs play checkers. Someone moves, you move, whether it's a tactical incident or budgets. Ours was always, what's 4 moves down on the chessboard? What's going to happen if we do this? What's going to happen 4 moves down? And so we created an organization that's very strategic in its thought. John Shirey, the city manager, said he calls it strategery. Strategery.
He borrowed that from the Bush II.
So we talk about everything's very strategic, because in engineering you're not just looking at what you're doing in the next flow. I did water flows, not the next flow, but what's going to happen downstream from there. You always got to look way down. What are the outcomes at the end? Not outputs, but what are the outcomes?
Well, another way that your tenure has been unusual, and you've brought the entire police department is noted for this now, is the absence of something. In many major cities across the United States, the police are considered to be an occupying force, and particularly distrusted by immigrant communities, minority communities, low-income communities. You as an individual, but the police force, during your tenure, really there is an absence of that, and there's a goodwill that exists between the police force and the community that is not necessarily indicative of many other cities around the country. How do you explain that success?
Private sector business
Really?
model. So when I took over as chief, I very much had the understanding that we run a business. We just happen to be, and it's a service business. We're in a service business because we don't produce a product, we don't manufacture something, we provide a service. And successful businesses have goals that everyone understands, and they want to be number 1 or number 2 in the market to be successful. So we set out as an organization to focus on what are our goals as the Sacramento Police Department. And I'm a firm believer in 3. There's no magic number about 3, but I think if you can do 3 things, you'll remember what they are. So we set out our goals as a management team, leadership team. Our first goal was to reduce serious crime. And that becomes an economic engine, because when a business wants to relocate to Sacramento or wants to stay invested in Sacramento, they look at crime rate, affordable housing, and good schools. So if we can drop the crime rate...
Not the Kings.
Well, hopefully they stay. I love the color you're wearing, so hopefully they can stay. But if you bring down the crime rate, then your housing prices are impacted by it, and so are the schools, because you have to work with everybody on that. So one of our goals was to bring down serious crime. Our next goal, our greatest asset, was to invest in our people. We had never publicly said that. But I'm a firm believer that if you invest in your employees in a service business, that great things will happen. People show up for work, they work extra, they have a better attitude about life, and that translates into how they communicate and how they interact with the public. And then the third goal in that is what we call great customer service. It's just absolutely great customer service. No, we'd never identified the community as our customer, never talked about business as our customer, but it has a different ring. We're going to go out and service the community is different than we're going to take care of our customers. And that became known as BIG. The B for bring down Part 1 crimes, serious crimes, the I for invest in our employees, and G for great customer service. 3 things, everybody knew what they were, all of our screensavers on all of our computers, and that's what we measure.
And that's what explains the goodwill?
So what happens is, when you talk about great customer service, I got asked by the employees, what does that mean? We know what bringing down crime means. What's great customer service? So that's the easiest of them all. A thank you out of every encounter. From the 911 dispatcher to the IT person fixing a computer to the police officer on the street. If you can get a thank you out of every interaction you have, then you've done your job. So everybody approached it differently.
What a simple thought.
It's very easy. And you put it, I call it the YouTube video effect. You're not creating a YouTube, but you're telling people, visualize in your head that out of every encounter you have, that you get a thank you out of it. That means you provide a great customer service. You went that extra mile. Even if you're arresting someone, you want them to give you a thank you for treating them right. You write someone a ticket, you want to give them a thank you for being polite to them. You help some find a lost child, you want to thank you out of all the family members. And people took that to heart. Our internal affairs complaints from the public went down 47%. We didn't cut staff. They went down 47% in the last 5 years.
Which is a key barometer.
That's a key barometer. Sick leave use went down. So these are all key barometers.
Right. I have to ask you, what was the toughest moment? Your worst moment as chief?
Laying people off. We laid off well over 100 people, and these are young employees who are starting their careers. They had a passion to work for the police department, put themselves through school, and because of no fault of their own, they were out of a job. And that was very, very, very difficult to do.
Now that you've been sort of liberated, okay, from the day-to-day and the politics and the business of being a big city police chief, If there was a third rail conversation, the tough, impolite one that we really need to have that we're not having, what would it be?
You know, it really is about that the region and law enforcement isn't moving fast enough. There's too many people, much like you said, are entrenched in the ways of let's just throw people in jail and throw away the key. That we really need to have those hard conversations is not just within Sacramento, because I know the men and women of the police department get it, but in the region, and I'm not talking about just Sacramento, but the entire Sacramento metropolitan region. How do we have that conversation to change how we do business?
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it's all about leadership. And I'd like to know, what's your personal definition of effective leadership?
Yeah, an effective leader is someone who listens, who understands that they don't know everything there is to know. In fact, you don't know what you don't know, so you need to go and find out what you don't know, and then you're very enlightened by that. Someone who really constantly takes the temperature of the internal climate and their external customer climate, and is very adaptable and adjust to that.
Right. And in our final moments, Chief, what I'd like to know, and I think what everyone would like to know is, in your 33 years of serving this city, growing up being a member of the Thundering Herd, what is it about this region that you love that's not apparent on the surface, but that you've seen because of all of the travels you've had that we should all take note of?
There is really a sense of pride in Sacramento, and it's a sense of community pride. I mean, there's certain people who are proud of their big city. They're proud of being in the city like San Francisco. In Sacramento, people are proud to be Sacramentans, whether it's the outdoorsness of the bike trail, whether they're proud of the river cats. They're very proud of who they are in Sacramento. Not what we are as, like I said, the big city like San Francisco, but who we are as a people. It's just a great place to raise a family, a great place to live.
And I think that we're going to leave it at that. Chief Rick Braziel, good to see you,
Thanks,
and
Scott.
best wishes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's our show. Thanks to the American Leadership Forum and to Chief Rick Braziel for being our guest. And thanks to you for watching. For Studio Sacramento, I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.